Welcome to Taste of Truth Tuesdays, where we'll be serving up bite-sized conversations on all things fitness, nutrition, mindset, and spirituality. So grab your headphones and get ready to taste the truth with us every Tuesday. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform because every bite counts. Hey, welcome back to Taste of Truth Tuesdays. I know, I said Tuesday was going to be the finale episode, and I mean, hey, it was. And if you've been listening to the bonus episodes, we just tackled the question, what would the world look like without religion? Would we find more freedom or just fragmentation? And you know, that episode cracked something open in me. And with it being Easter Sunday, I couldn't shake it. This quiet, persistent nudge to share one more thing. This wasn't planned, but my intuition, those cosmic breadcrumbs, as one of my friends mentioned, and I love that phrasing, that I've been following all throughout this deconstruction journey, led me here, again. And I started wondering, what if divinity never asked me to worship the system, only to pass through it? What if the breadcrumbs weren't leading to a final answer, but to a deeper, better question? What if even this, the unraveling, this disorientation, the aching search for meaning, is sacred? So here I am, a bonus episode on Easter Sunday. No dogma, no altar call, just a journey. Today I want to walk you through the 7 different ways Christians have historically understood the crucifixion. Theories of the atonement that go far beyond the one narrative that many of us were handed in the evangelical church. I'm going to be drawing from Dr. Gregory Karris' powerful work in Religious Refugees, one of his books. We've had him on season 2, and he broke down his more recent book, The Diabolical Trinity. But his book, The Religious Refugees, has helped so many folks see theology as not a fixed system, but more of a living, evolving reflection of our human attempts to make sense of suffering, sacrifice, and love. And I want to close with a reflection from a writer whose words felt like they cracked through the darkness this week and reminded me that we must be the light that we wish to see in the world. We are each the light, and we are each the darkness. And it is time to be the light we hold within us. It is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So light a candle with me. Let's explore, let's question, and let's remember, even this journey is sacred. Which cross are you preaching? Light in the darkness, rethinking the cross in a time of spiritual crisis. It's Easter Sunday, the lilies are out, the hallelujah choruses are loud, and the smell of the honey-baked ham is creeping in from the fellowship hall. But under all the shine and pastel, there's something haunting at the core of this holiday, a public execution, a cross, a body, and lots of blood. Christians call it atonement, but what does that actually mean? Well, that depends on who you ask, and good luck getting a straight answer from anyone in the Reformed Church. The dominant narrative that many of us were handed in this was Jesus died because we're disgusting sinners, depraved wretch, and God, who is so holy, he can't even look at us unless someone gets punished. So, Jesus took that cosmic beatdown on our behalf. This is known as the penal substitutionary atonement theory, PSA for short. And in many evangelical spaces, it's treated not as a theory, but as the gospel itself. And you're not just wrong if you question it, you're a heretic. What they never told us? That theory of the atonement wasn't even on the radar for the first 1,000 years of Christianity. There are, in fact, multiple historical atonement theories, and they've evolved in response to different cultural needs, questions, and philosophical frameworks. In the book Religious Refugees by Dr. Gregory Karris, he does what most pastors won't. He lays them all out clearly and compassionately without shaming those who are deconstructing harmful versions. So let's take a walk through history, and we're not here to pick a favorite, but we are here to understand the theology behind the cross. Behind every atonement theory says something very specific about who you believe God to be. So the first one is moral influence theory. One of the earliest interpretations of the atonement, the moral influence theory, teaches that Jesus Christ came and died not to satisfy the cosmic justice or defeat a metaphysical enemy, but to bring about a moral and spiritual awakening within humanity. His life, teachings, and death serve as a radical example of self-giving love, a catalyst meant to transform hearts, inspire virtue, and reform society from the inside out. This perspective places less emphasis on the divine wrath or transactional justice, and more on the transformative power of Christ's character and actions. Jesus is our teacher, our example, and our guide, and ultimately the first martyr, put to death, not to appease God, but because of the threat his moral clarity posed to the systems of power and corruption. While this theory was shaped significantly by Augustine in the 4th century, it is very important to note the nuances here because Augustine did not believe in human free will in the way that moral influence theory later came to emphasize. Instead, he taught that humans were absolutely incapable of true moral change apart from God's sovereign grace, and this is kind of the root beginning of Calvinism and the Reformation. So while the broader theory centers on free will and moral responsibility, Augustine's framing reminded early theologians that transformation was ultimately a divine partnership, God initiating the change through spirit, and humans will respond. So overall, in this view of the atonement theory, salvation isn't about escaping punishment, but about becoming whole, patterning our lives after Jesus, letting his example draw out the light within us. The crucifixion isn't a transactional moment that saves us. It's the inevitable consequences of living a life fully committed to radical love, truth, and justice. The second atonement theory is called Christus Victor, 3rd and 4th century early church fathers. So this was the dominant view for the first millennium of Christianity. Jesus' death isn't about satisfying wrath, but about defeating evil. His resurrection breaks the powers of sin, death, and the devil. He's not taking a punishment, but staging a jailbreak. What this says about God is that he's a liberator, not a punisher. Divine power is exercised through love, not domination. Number 3, the ransom theory was also from the early church, developed alongside Christus Victor theory. Jesus' death is the ransom paid to free humanity. Some say the ransom was paid to Satan, an idea that doesn't age well. Others took it metaphorically. Either way, it's about liberation, not appeasement. And so what this says about God is that he's willing to do whatever it takes to rescue his people, even entering enemy territory. Okay, number 4 is the satisfaction theory by 11th century, and that's Anselm, Anselm. We mentioned some of these in a previous episode that was talking about Franciscan theology, and I believe that guest, Carrie Moore, has been radicalized by the liberation theology in the point of critical race theory, oppressors versus oppressed. She mentioned a couple of these things, and I was really trying to point her towards this sounds more like moral influence theory. But again, that's what makes all of this so fun, is that we can all see things and interpret things differently. But the point is, this is where things started shifting towards punishment. Anselm reframes atonement into a honor culture. God's honor was offended by sin. Jesus' death restores that honor. So it's not about wrath just yet, but it plants the seed of this transactional, debt-based gospel. So what this says about God? Well, that he's this Lord whose dignity must be restored before reconciliation is possible. And now this leads me to penal substitutionary atonement theory, which was in the 16th century by the Reformers, and this is where it gets bloody. Jesus doesn't just restore God's honor, he takes your punishment. God's wrath must be satisfied. The cross becomes a cosmic courtroom. PSA is the love child of Calvinism and Reformation logic, and it's still the most popular theory in the evangelical circles today. And what this says about God is God can't forgive without violence. Someone has to pay, and that's Jesus. All right, the 6th, moral influence theory, 12th century, and it's making a resurgence today. So Jesus' death demonstrates the depth of divine love and inspires us to love in return. There's no wrath, no ransom, just radical empathy and moral clarity. It's not about appeasing God, but it's about awakening us. And what this says about God is God leads by example. Love transforms hearts, not threats of hell. And this leads me to the last theory, the scapegoat theory, which is relatively new from the 20th century, saying that humans are the violent ones, not God. We project our wrath onto scapegoats to maintain control and social order. Jesus exposes that cycle by becoming the scapegoat and refusing to return violence for violence. The cross unmasks our need for blood, not God's. What this says about God? God doesn't need a sacrifice. We do, and Jesus came to break that cycle. So, why does this matter? Well, because when you preach the cross, you're telling people something deeply formative about the character of God. And as Dr. Mark Gregory Karris argues, especially for those of us who are religious refugees who have been spiritually abused, the version of atonement that you've internalized can either heal you or harm you. If the cross is about satisfying wrath, it reinforces shame, control, and codependent faith. But if the cross is about revealing love, disarming power, and liberating humanity, then it becomes the opposite of trauma. It becomes the start of healing. So Karris gently unpacks these views without dogma. He affirms that many of us who have grown up in a punitive frameworks, we're not wrong to feel betrayed. We were sold a version of God who behaves more like an abuser than a loving parent. His invitation is not to throw it all out, but to re-see the cross through the lens of compassion, justice, and divine love. So the real question is, which cross are you preaching? Because whichever one you choose is shaping how you see God, yourself, others, pain, justice, hope. And in times like this, when spiritual darkness is not a metaphor but a lived experience, we need more than just theological precision. We need light. As K.W. Norton put it so poignantly this week, we are magical in the sense that the life-giving Creator created us with the natural elemental perfection of the universe in mind. In the sense that we are indeed magical and powerful enough to overcome, to dispel this darkness which has fallen upon us. We live in a time of spiritual darkness and of spiritual warfare where forces are pitted against our beautiful and compassionate vulnerability as human beings. With all of the paths of feeling and all of the logic and reason that we have at our beck and call, we must stand against this darkness. We must be the light we wish to see in the world. In ways I cannot explain in this essay, we are each the light and each the darkness. It is time to be the light we hold within us. And as we have been so often told, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So maybe this Easter, instead of asking which theory is correct, we start by asking, what kind of God do I believe in? What kind of gospel am I living? What kind of light am I carrying into the world? And that's all I have for you today, folks. Thanks again for listening. If you have yet to leave a 5-star review on Substack or Spotify, all that really helps get this podcast to more listeners. I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave me a comment, write me a message, send me an email. Anyways, we are on a break for the season, but please keep your eyes out because there are still some more bonus episodes that I plan to drop, and Taste Test Thursdays, the bonus series, is still going for a couple more weeks, I believe. So until then, maintain your curiosity, embrace skepticism, and keep tuning in. Have a good week.